Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
Unexpected news was issued yesterday, and that was that Cardinal Manuel Fernandez is going to issue a document from the DDF next week on Tuesday, November 4th, addressing Marian titles. Now, immediately the aftermath of this announcement, all over social media, people began to speculate that we're going to get a doctrinal, dogmatic definition of Mary, co-redemptrix, and all the rest of it. If that was the case, it would be coming from the Pope, not from the DDF. Instead, I tend to take more of a negative view. Surprise, surprise. And I will show you why I tend to take a negative view. But first, let's go over what the news is, what co-redemptrix means. I know there are Protestants who watch. No Catholic who has even the most baseline understanding of the faith believes that the Blessed Virgin Mary is on equal footing with Jesus Christ. No Catholic who has even the vaguest correct sense of their faith believes that. Co-redemptrix, the short version means, is that she participated. And I'll give you an analogy here that will help make it more clear when we get to that part. But first, let's go right to a more normal Catholic news source before we get to a more independent media, an analyst who will give you some definitions here. The headline is Vatican to weigh in on Mary's role in salvation with doctrine document on November 4th. This is a Catholic news agency author writing for the Catholic World Report. It doesn't get much more mainstream and not rigid trad than this. Here are the details, such as they are relevant. The Vatican's Doctrine Office announced Thursday it will release a document on November 4th about titles of Mary that refer to her, quote, cooperation in the work of salvation. Mary's contribution to human salvation, specifically the title of co-redemptrix or co-redeemer, has been a point of theological debate for decades, with proponents calling for Mary's role in redemption to be declared a dogma, but critics saying it exaggerates her importance and could damage efforts for unity with other Christian denominations. Cardinal Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, will present the doctrinal note on the topic titled Mater Populi Fidelis, Faithful Mother of the People. There's your first hint at what he's going to do. At the Jesuit Curia in Rome, Fernandez told journalists in July the Dicastery was working on a text on various Marian themes, but did not reveal more about its content. End quote. Faithful Mother of the People is probably the title they'll go with. This probably means, before a live stream, we were joking about titles that they would give her related to synodality. Mary, Mother of Synodality, Mary, Mediatrix of Dialogue, that kind of silliness. But it's not all that silly. Faithful Mother of the People. That's what you're likely to see, or something very akin to it. Now, for a little bit of background on what the co-redemptrix whole issue is, we go to Michael Haynes and his Per Mariam Substack. Michael Haynes is a Vatican press pool accredited journalist. He's actually a journalist, but he's got a background in theology enough to teach you as much as you generally need to know for the purpose of this video what the crux of the issue is. And part of the issue is this. I have seen Catholics who say they will leave the faith if she is actually given the title co-redemptrix in a formal way, despite the fact that popes for at least 2 centuries, possibly longer than that, have used that title. And in all actuality, as he will demonstrate here, you can find references to co-redemptrix going back to the apostolic times. This is not a new thing. It's just the fifth Marian dogma that's never been defined. But his headline is Vatican to publish note on Mary's cooperation in the works of salvation. Here's what he has to say. The Vatican's doctrinal office will soon publish a note on certain title referring to Mary's cooperation in the work of salvation. On November 4th, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith will publish a doctrinal note regarding, it seems, the topic of Marian co-redemption. A press note from the DDF today reads, the presentation of the new document to the Dicastery entitled Mater Populi Fidelis will take place. Doctrinal note on certain Marian titles referring to Mary's cooperation in the work of salvation. Manuel Fernandez is the one presenting it. People are highly anticipating this. But here's what's actually more useful. So far, the formal proclamation of Mary as co-redemptrix has not been achieved, despite the great wealth of the church has on the matter over many centuries, as espoused by great popes and saints. The development of the theological basis for the term dates back to the church fathers, and indeed, usage of the term itself has become much more frequent following the Middle Ages and thanks to many popes. Here's a book he wrote on the matter, recommended to you by Bishop Schneider. The book is Mary, the Motherly Co-Redemptrix. Plug for the book. If you want to read more on this subject, he has penned one that comes with the recommendation of Bishop Athanasius Schneider, which in my mind comes highly recommended. The word co-redemptrix has its origins in the Latin language and is made up of two words, cum and redimere. Cum translates to with in English, denoting one person acting alongside another. Upon consulting any Latin dictionary or other text, one can see that at no point does the word cum ever mean equal to or interchangeable, unlike the manner in which a co-pilot refers to one who is interchangeable with the pilot. Redimere is the verb meaning to buy back, set free by payment. We're going to pause there. And I want to give you my own analogy. It's not really mine. I saw this on X yesterday. I wish I'd saved the post so I can give proper credit to the person, but it's sufficient to know I didn't come up with this. But if you've ever done research in college, high school, or whatever, and you came across a paper that had multiple authors, imagine the scenario where you try to contact the authors for clarification and you manage to contact one of the co-authors, only to find out from that co-author that one of the other authors had done virtually all the work. And that for whatever reason, that person is listed as co-author. Typically, it means, in this case, that a core idea this other person had worked on got it included in an important way in the document. But one of the other authors is the main author. I ran into this, for example, when it seems like an eternity ago, my own doctoral dissertation was finished, and I had basically been informed that if I were to publish sections of it, I would need to give one of my, the chair of my defense committee a co-author credit for it, because he was also my advisor who helped me through the thing and helped clarify issues we came across along the way. Now, I've never published any of the part of it, but that's kind of what a co-authorship means. In this case, co-redemptrix means she participated in, but again, no Catholic who understands their faith even the slightest believes that the Virgin Mary did any of the really heavy lifting. Go look at the Our Lady of Sorrows. Go look at the entirety of that, and you'll get the idea of how she cooperated at the foot of the cross and in her prayers and the suffering she had, knowing full well through her life what Jesus's fate was likely to be, as well as watching her son on the cross. A lot of people downplay the importance of that. We're not trying to overplay it to correct it. We'll go back to him here. When combined with the female ending of the verb, one can get the meaning she who buys back with. Co-redemptrix meaning a cooperation in Christ's salvific action, with Mary not equal to Christ but working with him. John Paul II famously used the term often, evidencing his Marian devotion, which was well known. Indeed, the Vatican's offices for liturgy and doctrine have also approved the title. In response to a dubium regarding the weight of the Feast of the Seven Sorrows of Mary, the Congregation of Rites in 1908 declared the wish that, quote, the devotion of the sorrowful mother may increase and the piety of the faithful and their gratitude toward the merciful co-redemptrix of the human race may intensify. And it goes on. He gives you a lot of history on the use. It's not a new thing. And a lot of people, for some reason, are thinking we're going to get something good out of the Vatican on this. And now here's my disclaimer. I would like to be wrong in being my usual negative assessment on these things. I would like to be wrong so much so that if I am wrong, we get a positive document. And I don't mean positive looking, where you later find ambiguous things in there that are, or hidden things in there that are a problem. For instance, there was the address of Pope Leo recently that I said mostly was fine. Well, it turned out not really. There's a lot of weird theology in it. But if I'm wrong, and he does give a Catholic definition of co-redemptrix, and we get the fifth Marian dogma, even though that would come from the pen of the Pope, not the DDF. If we get that, I will retract the statement as soon as it becomes clear that that's the case. I make you that promise here. I just don't think it will. Now, here's why. It's not the first Marian document that was issued by Cardinal Fernandez. In fact, you might remember, the guidelines document on Marian apparitions that was issued by the Vatican, specifically by Cardinal Fernandez, about a year ago. Headline from Catholic News Agency. Fernandez, Vatican's new apparitions guidelines stress caution in discernment process. This is a document that changed the rules on how Marian apparitions were judged by the Vatican. They no longer, since this document, label any Marian apparition as worthy of belief. They don't do that. They make no supernatural claims about any Marian apparition. Instead, they give you, at best, a nihil obstat, which means there's no impediment to the faith for observing and believing this. But there's no endorsement of anything. They will still issue negative rulings on things. If you want to know what that looks like, I'll show you. Because inside the Vatican, Mr. Robert Moynihan did a deeper dive into this. And he did leave one out, and I'll tell you what that is. And this is exactly why I don't think they're going to get the co-redemptrix definition. But he gives you a long history about, Fatima and the rest. Then Mr. Moynihan goes here. He says, quote, Cardinal Fernandez presented on May 17th a new Vatican document on how apparitions and visions, like the apparitions of La Salette, Fatima, and Lourdes, should be studied and evaluated by the Church. Point 1. The essential point of this reform procedure seems to be that the Church will no longer publicly affirm that any phenomenon of this type is of supernatural origin. In the past, the Church would study a phenomenon and say either that it was not of supernatural origin, or that it could not be determined whether or not it was of supernatural origin, or that it was of supernatural origin and so worthy of belief. Still, even if the Church sometimes did judge that there was something supernatural about an apparition, no such phenomenon has ever been proposed to the faithful as a point of faith that they are required to believe. Now, under the new rules, the highest level of approval that will be granted to any such phenomenon is nihil obstat, that there is, quote, nothing standing in the way or, quote, nothing impeding belief in the vision or apparition as an authentic encounter with the heavenly. Point 2. The second point is that the authority of the Holy See procedurally is strengthened and the authority of the local bishop is weakened. Under the new rules, the Holy See will have an even tighter control over approving or disapproving popular devotions around claimed supernatural phenomenon. Point 3. This is the long point. In his introduction to the new procedures at May 17th press conference, Cardinal Fernandez mentioned as a negative example to be avoided that the thought and writing of the French theologian Pascal Quesnel, he was a brilliant theologian from more than 300 years ago, who strongly supported the thought of Cornelius Jansen, as in the Jansenists, after whom the Jansenist heresy took its name. What did it mean that Fernandez spoke about Quesnel in this press conference? Well, for some time, a number of Catholic observers of this pontificate have said that a key to the pontificate of Pope Francis is to realize that he is persuaded that there is among the traditionalist Catholics a spirit reminiscent of Jansenism. A representative article on this topic appeared in 2014, almost 10 years ago, written by Michael Sean Winters at the National Catholic Reporter. Winters was reacting to an article by Damian Thompson of The Spectator, in which Thompson had argued that Francis was ignorant of the situation of the Catholic Church in the English-speaking world, blinded by his Latin American experience. Thompson had written, quote, "The Pope is hungry to spread the gospel, and in Latin America he sees that being done most effectively by left-wing priests in the slums," says a Vatican insider. What he doesn't realize is that in North America and other English-speaking countries, it is the conservatives who have fire in their bellies, who evangelize, often with minimal encouragement from their bishops, and no one is likely to explain it to him. The National Catholic Reporter writer in response says, quote, "It is surely the case that there is a kind of conservative Catholic in the English-speaking world with fire in the belly. But here's where Thompson's analytical skills fail him. Having identified the Pope's being a Jesuit as a key to understanding the man, Thompson fails to see that the Holy Father, above all, is engaged in an old struggle for the society of Jesus. He is confronting the Jansenists of our day, the very same conservative Catholics in the English-speaking world whom Thompson thinks have the fire of the gospel in their bellies. Is not the gospel, but a hyper-moralistic concern against spiritual contagion that animates conservatives. Thompson champions, and quite clearly, this is not what animates Pope Francis." In other words, and as the article goes on to say, that anything, and this was more clearly laid out in the actual source document, anything from a Marian apparition feeds distrust of the hierarchy will automatically get the apparition rejected. That means La Salette would have been rejected. Our Lady of Akita would have been rejected. Our Lady of what gets called good success. Really, if you look at the translation of the name, it should be good event of the purification. Quito, Ecuador, 17th century. That one would have been rejected too. Anything that feeds into rigidity and ultra-moralistic claims. Fernandez goes on to say in that article that the concern is that there are Catholics who believe that they have to cling to the faith, that they have to cling to hypermorality, or what we would have just called Catholic morality in bygone eras, instead of loving thy neighbor, as if those two are pitted against one another. Anything that causes division will be a ground for not approving a Marian apparition. You need to look at that document to see what's likely to be in the next. I do not expect a co-redemptrix definition because it will cause division. It will be a stumbling block for most Protestants in the synodal dialogue, in ecumenical dialogue. That's what it will be. Despite what I told you, she united her suffering at the foot of the cross to our Lord's suffering on the cross. That's what it means. So you're not likely to see a co-redemptrix definition from this Vatican. I would like to be wrong. And if I am wrong, I will come here and say, hey, I was wrong. Credit where it's due. I don't expect to have to do that. But we'll find out together in about 4 days. By the way, All Hallows Eve is today. That also means that we'll be starting the octave in November. First 8 days where our special indulgences attached to praying for the repose of the souls of the faithfully departed, going to cemeteries and praying for the souls there, or for souls that are in purgatory in general. Don't let it pass you by. Marmar says they've been calling traditional Catholics Jansenists for ages. And you know why they do that? Because we tend to be the ones who look at the moral situation in the broader culture today and are appalled. We tend to be the ones who, if we let our children watch television at all, it's stuff that we have carefully screened. We tend to be the ones who, and I don't mean just like making sure some show doesn't have some adult themes in it or whatever, that we're making sure there's not some sort of secular propaganda that undermines their faith, and we tend to examine things under a microscope that way. We tend to take seriously the warnings of St. Paul in Scripture, the warnings of the saints on the fewness of the saved. We tend to take the warning of, I think it's Peter in the New Testament, to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, although it might be St. Paul. We take those things seriously, but those are rigid and concerned about morality. We know full well that immoral behavior can cause us to lose our souls. Raven Ray says, I'm curious to know the reactions of the Eastern churches to Fernandez on their own Mariology. I would like to see that too, because whatever it is that document he issues is binding on the Eastern churches as well. The ones that are in communion with Rome, the Maronites and the Byzantines and Syro-Malabar and all the rest will have to submit to this. I'm very curious what you think about this, so let me know in the comments. Please pray that we get a good definition instead of, as Traditionalist Catholic says, I could see an Our Lady of Synodality, unfortunately. Now remember, I did show you at the beginning of this what the title's likely to be, and it wasn't anything being silly here. It was just literally Mater Populus Fidelis, Faithful Mother of the People. That is a synodal title. But I expect rules on the titles for Marian apparitions and for the Virgin Mary in general. And those are the things that I'm concerned about. As somebody in the live chat said before we started, there are nearly countless titles for the Virgin Mary that nobody, to any of our knowledge, has cataloged all of them in one place. That's something to be concerned about. So pray for this weekend. We will get an answer on Tuesday, which means on Wednesday, this is likely to be what I'm talking about with you that morning. Let me know what you think of this in the Joe, you don't know better than, centuries of popes going back to the apostolic times. Again, no Catholic believes she was on equal footing with Jesus in her participation. Go read the sources that I'll post within an hour or so of this live stream ending on what it means. If you missed what it means, I went over it already once. But this is actually a perfect example of why I don't think you're going to get a co-redemptrix definition from this papacy. They're all about unity, and it will cause division. I don't expect the fifth Marian dogma to be formally defined by a pope until probably the other side of a bunch of mushroom clouds and civilization rebuilding itself. That's probably when it'll happen. And I think the fifth Marian dogma's definition will come during the Marian Age of Peace and might actually be part of that per prophecy. But let me know otherwise what you think about this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps a lot too. Please pray for the church and Fernandez and Pope Leo, because remember, Fernandez would not issue this document without the Pope's approval. So always pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.